Open Market is sponsored by AdLib, the self-serve DSP solution making advertising easy. What do the world's largest demand-side platforms have in common? They're effective, but they require large annual contracts and spend minimums. With AdLib, growing agencies get a single platform that connects to every top global DSP with no contracts, no spend minimums, and G2's #1 ranked support. That means access to the entire universe of TV, digital out-of-home, audio, display, video, and native without a hassle and with no blind spots. It's incredibly easy to use, plus it can automate most of the work your team spends hours a day doing manually. Get the most powerful media buying technology without the barriers to entry. Check out AdLib at getadlib.com today.
Welcome to Open Market, a podcast on building companies in the advertising industry. I'm Joe Zappa, and I'm joined by AdTech's frat president, Eric Franchi.
AdTech's frat president?
You were the bad boy frat president of AdTech, as evidenced by the line down the block at your party on Monday, from which your dear co-host, i.e. me, was rejected and basically forced out the door by a very aggressive bouncer. How do you answer these charges?
I blame Ari Papara for all of this. For anyone who knows me, they would find the title of the AdTech bad boy, brat boy, completely ridiculous. And I apologize for what happened on Monday. It was I just apologize.
That's okay. I'll forgive you eventually. I mean, you might ask, did everyone I run into be like, why weren't you at the party? That was so weird. And I had to be like, my co-host who owns the venture firm that was sponsoring the party or throwing the party did not put me on the VIP list. But that's okay. There are wounds in relationships, and over time they heal.
I only hope that you give me the time and the chance to allow that to heal, Joe. And I apologize.
Someday I'll find it in my heart to forgive you.
It was a long, successful advertising week, and I hope you found your way into some other venues.
I did. I found my people. And how was the party? Did people get messy? Were there any messy people?
No, I don't think so at all. It went over really well. The Mad Tech team, who's really the kind of organizers and kind of event infrastructure, they did an amazing job. Shout out to them. And then AdTech God, who created all the buzz that prevented a lot of people from being able to get in. His or her marketing wizardry was on full display.
You guys need to rent a bigger venue next time. Like, can you rent like a penthouse in Hudson Yards? Like, let's class this up. Like, we need at least 2,000 attendees.
We've validated that there is a lot of demand for in-person events this week.
Yeah, no, it's true. The Marketecture media business, the events arm is going to come into being pretty soon, I'd expect.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, never call me a frat boy again, please.
So, yeah, you only look like one. Your attitude doesn't really cohere with it. Today, we wanted to dive deeper into specific dimensions of your experience as one of the founders of Undertone. We did a podcast with Mike Cassidy where we ran through sort of like the overall experience. But I think that as a founder and operator yourself and one who's invested in, 80 plus founders as one of the general partners at Imperium, you have deep insight into some of the key experiences any founder is going to have to go through. So the three I wanted to ask you to talk about are some of the best hires you made, because hiring obviously so critical to being a CEO and scaling a company. The toughest challenge you faced and how you guys navigated that. And then thirdly, on a more personal side of things that we don't get into very often, what life after exit looked like and why you decided to go the direction that you did. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. Let's go.
Okay, so best hire, you said Undertone has different phases, so you wanted to talk about a few. I think the first was Mark Costa. Why don't you tell me about him and why you hired him and where the company was when you did so?
Yeah. So when we first started Undertone, it was after a year or so of being an agency, and to start an ad network, which Undertone at its core, was just a raw pure play ad network at the time. You basically need like three things. You need demand, i.e., ads from brands and, sort of other buyers. You need supply, which is, back then it was just like website inventory. And then you need just the basic technology infrastructure to make it all work, which at the time was just ad serving. There were back then like a handful of ad servers, DoubleClick being one of them, and there were a few independent ones. And we stumbled upon one that was, kind of a specialist in serving the burgeoning kind of third-party ad tech, ad network ecosystem. It was called Zedo, Zedo, San Francisco-based company. And they're also like, I think at the time, if I recall correctly, like really cheap, which for us, from a cost perspective, because we never raised any money, was super important. So we started working with this company Zedo just to be our backbone for the ad network. And our main contact was a senior engineer by the name of Mark Costa. And we just started working with Mark like he was, just like the fourth employee of Undertone. Because at the time we were three people. And he became very quickly just so indispensable to our business that he felt like part of the company and not just a vendor. And over time, Zedo became more important to the business, and Market became more and more important to the business. We just got to know him and spent a lot of time with him. And we very quickly realized that Mark filled a gap in our business at the time, which was having, some form of technical talent. Mike and I, and the third person that were working with us at the time, we were all salespeople. So we were all commercially oriented. We were out there like making it rain, driving demand, finding supply, but we had like zero technical know-how outside of just the basics of getting something up and running. So we, basically went after Mark to join the company to be like our first combination product technology and operations person. And it was a real bet by us and a real bet by Mark, because while we had, a very fast growing, sort of kind of successful out of the gate business, entrepreneurship, startups, this is circa 2002, 2003, after the whole dot-com bust, was not a preferred career path. So, we were doing something that everybody thought was like weird and crazy. So trying to convince somebody to join us on this journey was like super, super hard. But thankfully, we were able to do so. Mark uprooted himself from San Francisco, moved to New York, joined us in little office, and I would say was for sort of like V1 of Undertone all the way through almost to the end was like one of the most important pivotal hires like we ever made. Mark did everything: technology, product, operations. He was a cultural leader. If you ask someone to like play a little like, what do you picture when you picture Undertone, that knew the business quite well, that worked at the business? Oftentimes they would just show a picture of Mark. He was that integral to the company. Grew up with us, grew up in front of us, and has moved on to great things. He's now the chief digital officer of JCDecaux, which is one of the largest out of home companies in the world.
I think an interesting aspect of that for listeners is that when you're a commercial founding team and you're trying to find that first technical hire, that's such an important hire. And it's hard because you might not know how to vet them, right? Like I've always thought if I started a tech company, obviously I'd be commercially oriented and I would want a technical co-founder, not even just to create the initial technology, but also then to hire other technical people. Cause like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to validate their abilities. So how did you guys do that in this case?
We got completely lucky with Mark. We didn't know what we didn't know what we were doing. It wasn't until much later that we hired a CTO who was a VP of engineering at DoubleClick. And this is after we did some private equity. So for a long time, we just lucked out because we hired a senior engineer from the company that built the ad server that we were using, that had just this incredible combination of both technical know-how and like relationship building. And he was able to convince like other technical people to join the company. So a lot of the knowledge, and I've said this before in our conversations, other conversations, a lot of the knowledge that, we have today in terms of just like how to hire, vet, kind of smell BS on roles that you might not necessarily be too familiar with. Like it just didn't exist at the time. So we made so many hiring mistakes, and we just got lucky with Mark. That was it.
And then how do you grow with someone like that? I mean, I guess it probably just happens organically, but like you said, he was present for so many different stages of the company and stayed for a really long time. So how do you navigate that when the company they come into is obviously very different from the company they end up staying at?
You need, again, and this is why it's hard to answer this question of like who was the most important hire at Undertone when it was a 15-year journey, when it went from 0 to 10, 10 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 150 exit, right? So the more in those very beginning stages, you look to kind of take a bet on people that are like kind of high quality, high caliber, high capacity, high energy, high intellectual horsepower people in general, and kind of give them the ability to do a lot of like great stuff, bring them in to more than just what their job function is, and give them, I think, the capacity to grow within the organization. The luckier you're going to get in terms of retaining those individuals. So yeah, it's Mark ended up running so much of the company as we scaled from a product engineering operations perspective, that I could only say that we just got very, very lucky with finding someone that just like knew the basics of ad tech before ad tech was even a word, had the ability to just observe and touch every part of a business that was just like right place, right time, right model, and was able to grow and successfully scale within the organization over time.
I think hiring someone from a vendor is also an interesting tactic because you get the chance when you're not yourself a technologist, like you get a chance to see what they do and to work with them. They're an expert on things. You can also, through working with them in the vendor capacity, you can get to know their personality and make sure they have those fundamental traits. So, that could be a great way if you're looking to hire someone in a function in which you're not particularly an expert, to test it out without just going like 0 to 100.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, like I said, Mark ended up moving on to great things. He's got like an incredible leadership role at one of the most important companies in out of home. He's a great, just a fantastic person and friend.
Next up was Jay. Can you tell us more about Jay?
Yeah, Jay Askenazi, who's most people are probably more familiar with Jay than me in some parts of the industry. We hired Jay, I want to say it was probably plus or minus 2009, 2010. He was, he came in as an account manager, basically someone who helps, with the customer success function as it's known today. And I think he came from Discovery. He was like an equivalent at Discovery Television. Again, might be a little bit off, fact check me on this one, as a sales planner, which is again, sort of like a person that was supporting and aspired to be in a sales function. And I remember the first day I met him, I don't remember exactly the content of the conversation, but from that second, he was just like asking to, just be thought of when we, kind of need somebody to jump in on, something new. If there was a new project, if there was something related to video, I know a lot about video. I really want to, be a salesperson one day. I remember the conversation thinking like, oh my God, this is a very high potential person. And I didn't really necessarily hire him, but, we brought him in and, just like immediately there was something different about him. Like it's the Brian O'Kelly line, like this person has sparkle. Jay had like a degree of sparkle that, I've only seen a handful of time in a non-founding person, like just a person that was built to be commercially successful. That's what Jay was as a young person. And he went from being an account manager to an account executive to leading a team to leading a region to leading all of East Coast sales, which at the time, and by the time he was running East Coast sales, I want to say it was like 75% of the $100 million of revenue. So this person just rocketed throughout the organization, and somewhat like Mark was able to like grow within the organization, gained a lot of fans within the organization, kind of became a very much a cultural leader for all of the commercial parts of the organization. And again, went on to great things. Total funny sidebar about Jay and Mark and how they're connected. Jay at one point left to take on a big job, be the CRO of a startup called Run, the Run DSP. Run DSP was founded by Seth Hidman, who we mentioned previously as one of the CEOs of one of the most valuable companies in the portfolio. At some point, call it 6 months later, they hired Mark Costa to be their CTO. So and Run obviously had this incredible, no pun intended run, and towards a very fast, successful exit. I think part of it was, man, that Seth guy, he is a monster. He has an eye for talent. And literally the two most talented people that I can think of from, a couple of different phases of Undertone, he ended up hiring them, and they obviously have gone on to great things over time. Jay went to be he was head of sales for Xander, then round tripped back to Publicis, who had acquired Run, was chief commercial officer there, and then now is head of revenue and growth at Roku. It's just been incredible to watch him over the years. I think fulfill the potential that I saw that first day of sitting down with him.
Yeah, I'm sure when you had the chance to invest in Seth as the CEO founder of Transmit, that was a huge positive signal that he had hired two of your best people from Undertone.
Yeah, I mean, again, you can be mad at those people, right? They sort of kind of poach your best employees, or you can recognize real and then look to partner with them and back them, over the course of a career, because careers are long and life is long. So it's just so funny how that all came together. And with Jay, extremely customer centric, extremely driven, extremely demanding of the functions that kind of work with and supported sales, was, I think, a good balance of collaborative, but a real driver, and, just demanded excellence from everybody around him. And, I feel like the company, particularly the go-to-market function, sort of kind of rose around Jay as he emerged to be a real leader.
Yeah, I think with sales/account people, so much of it probably comes down to those fundamental personality traits of high energy, high drive. They really get the technology. They're eager to get it. They want to understand what the customers feel and how to articulate things in a way that will make sense to them. So it sounds like you were able to perceive those things in him, and those things, never go away.
Yeah, for sure. So again, it's no surprise that he's gone on to have such incredible success in his career.
And then the third is Corey, who, of course, ultimately ended up becoming the CEO of Undertone. Tell us more about when you first hired Corey.
Yeah, Corey Fargo came, I want to say, 2013-ish. We had hired him as COO when we were really looking to scale as a kind of product-centric organization. He had held senior product roles at a couple of other companies in the past. We also recognized that, we just needed more corp dev chops. And Corey had acquired at his previous company, it was called Rovio, which I think was ultimately acquired by TiVo. He had acquired something like 30 to 40 companies in his time. We were not good at corp dev. We were not good at M&A. We had no strategy, no direction, no process for kind of post-merger integration, which is the most important part of it. We just needed, somebody that, had a bunch of experience that we didn't have, and, really operated at a high level. And we got extremely lucky with Corey. If you've ever interacted with him, he has a different gear. That's the way I would describe him. He walks into a room and everybody just starts working faster and working more urgently, because he has this incredible urgency to him. Again, I feel like he is one of those people that in retrospect kind of raised the game of the entire company by, creating process, by creating urgency, by creating extra accountability. With Corey, we hired him as COO. We promoted him to CEO after a couple of years. He led the acquisition of a couple of companies. One was we acquired a DSP. It was called Upfront Digital Media. We acquired a creative platform called SparkFlow. SparkFlow was like so instrumental in creating what Undertone ultimately became. And, a lot of that was just having, the right person to help you really be process driven around corp dev and M&A. And then finally, as I mentioned to others, and, I give him just a ton of credit for, like, he took the ball and ran it into the end zone with a successful exit to Perion. So, again, Corey is one of those people that you need to be at a certain scale to maximize the value that they bring to an organization. Like Mark, even though again, Mark is running a big company right now, Mark was truly like a foundational 0 to 1 founding employee. Jay was a person that, at the right time when, we were in market and, scaling, like was able to drive like scale from a revenue perspective. Corey was that executive that, took us to another level. So, that's why I said in my text to you, it's hard to give you the most important hire because with that type of journey, like it's a different company every 5 years. So it's a different, I think MVP every 5 years. And there's so many more that I didn't mention, but those are 3 that were critical at different times.
Well, to that point about needing to be at a certain scale to maximize the value of someone like Corey, was that the biggest hire you and Mike had ever made? And was it daunting to bring in someone at such a senior level?
No, at that point, the private equity investment by JMI was transformational to us, and we talked about this a little bit on the pod with Mike, because they really brought in a lot of institutional know-how to hire executives. So at that point, we had senior executives, some of which we hired and didn't work out, some of which stayed within the organization. So we were used to having C-level executives, but again, it was just somebody that was extremely important to what we needed to gain at the time and executed just quite well. So we had C-level execs. We were used to working with them. We were used to hiring them, interacting with them. It was just the company was ready for it at the time.
Yeah. So if we synthesize some of what you said about these 3 hires, I mean, I think fundamentals are very important, sort of like vigor and drive, flexibility, especially for startups, like the ability to evolve as the organization evolves. And then with Corey, it was a combination of those fundamentals. And then also for a senior executive, someone who brings something very salient that is just missing, so that they're going to be additive on day one because you didn't have those corporate dev chops, and he could bring that.
Yeah, we really needed to develop a proper product marketing function. So again, towards the end at Undertone, there was a lot of visibility in the market from a product marketing perspective. Part of it is we just didn't have any product marketing before, so it was all of these gaps that we observed that you just bringing in a person with the right amount of experience, energy, and empowering them can change the trajectory of the business. And again, I give Corey a ton of credit. He's become a person that's like a personal advisor to me that I try to pull into a lot of projects because I've just seen how great he is.
So I asked you about the biggest challenge you faced, and obviously you faced a lot in a decade or so of running Undertone.
Yeah.
What was the biggest one that came to mind?
In 2009, 2010, there was, the early emergence of a new category pioneered by, again, ironically, the person I ended up, partnering with for the next phase of my career, Joe Zawadzki, the demand side platform. So the DSP category was, quite emergent. There was a handful of original companies, Invite Media being a name that might come to mind for some, that, effectively gave the opportunity to have a buying infrastructure for the scaled availability of ads thanks to ad exchanges that didn't really exist prior to that. And ad networks were a category that had a ton of momentum for the second half of the 2000s, the decade, right? Call it 2004 to 2009, because it filled a really big gap on being able to, very quickly provide, sort of like a scaled audience-based buying approach for buyers. what happened with the DS, first the advent of the ad exchange pioneered by Media and Brian O'Kelly, then the DSPs with MediaMath, Invite, and a couple of others, is they started giving ad network like scale to any type of buyer, be it, this emergent category of trading desks at the agencies, some sophisticated in-house marketers. So all of a sudden, it created, at first, competition for ad networks. And then very quickly, as the agencies started, realizing the opportunity from a scale and a business model and a margin perspective that this type of business model would offer, it created, I think, an existential risk for the category. So, very quickly, Undertone sellers who had, these great long-term relationships with agencies would, start to get some pushback on, why should we work with you at all if we have access to the same type of inventory with the in-house solutions that are being provided us by our agency trading desks that are using this new technology called DSPs and ad exchanges. That was, I think, the most challenging thing for any ad network in existence at that time. It was a big category. There were hundreds of them. There's old slides that we created that had 400 ad nets on them. Very quickly, that set was whittled down to, 20, then 10, then 5, because the capabilities, if there wasn't differentiation, were very quickly commoditized.
Yeah, I think differentiation is the key point there, which is, of course, top of mind for me as a marketing person. I think when that sort of category threat arises, you then have to differentiate on two levels. You need to differentiate from the DSP. So you sort of have to say, why would you still come to an ad network as opposed to, the open exchange, which actually, ironically enough, we see happening now, right? There's a sort of resurgence of the ad network as people are looking for curation and safety and all of that stuff. You also have to differentiate from other ad networks because your category is going to face compression. And so then you need to make a stronger case for, if everyone isn't using dozens of ad networks, if they're only going to use a few in addition to the open exchange, why should you be one of them?
Very well put. So what we were able to, kind of figure out was, what did Undertone bring to the table that wasn't necessarily available on the exchanges with the DSPs. At first, it was differentiated inventory. At this time, a lot of premium publishers were quite wary of the programmatic ecosystem. So, they felt comfortable working with us, Undertone, because as sellers ourselves, we respected the primary channel, direct sales of a publisher. We knew how to, kind of avoid channel conflict in market. We were, I think, a great partner to them. So, kind of the initial pivot for Undertone was focusing what had always been a message for us, but doubling down on the inventory, doubling down on the message around, again, this now sounds like 2024 stuff. But
yeah, exactly.
Which is crazy that it's coming back around, again, to me. But premium inventory, brand safety, direct relationships with the publishers, not, buying across a bunch of different, platforms. We would do things like offer money back brand safety guarantees. So, for us, it became all about the inventory as the first differentiator. From there, inventory, again, became less and less of a differentiator as publishers started embracing some of the programmatic capabilities, working with SSPs who connected to DSPs, who connected to trading desks. So for us, the next step was then, if inventory is now kind of fully accessible, fully commoditized to a degree, what's not? And what's not is ad formats. Because at the time, the programmatic ecosystem was all built for standardization, all built for, what the standard kind of programmatic IAB, standard ad units were. So the, kind of cool, large, custom, bespoke type of ad formats that became the calling card of Undertone in many reasons or many ways, what people still think about the business today, those were not available programmatically. Those you couldn't get from your agency trading desk. Those you needed to work with a company like us to access. So we just started pivoting the business towards that, building scale towards those type of ad formats, which again gave us frankly a rebirth. because we're able to offer new monetization to publishers, new opportunities to agencies and brands. We started getting into the creative technology, which led to the acquisition of SparkFlow, which led to basically us sort of kind of transforming as a business. So the whole birth of programmatic, the birth of the agency trading desk, that was a multi-year challenge for us that we always needed to stay ahead of. But ultimately, thankfully, we were super focused on differentiation. And when a lot of companies just started kind of moving the direction of like embracing programmatic, embracing data, embracing audiences, it was great. But there was again this like kind of fertile ground that nobody else was focused on. I give Mike a ton of credit, Mike Cassidy a ton of credit. He always pushed us. He always pushed me to make sure we're kind of going in the areas where other people aren't necessarily fishing, to ultimately find where the differentiation and sustainability could be.
Yeah, the Undertone story viewed from this juncture in 2024 really illuminates the more things change, more they stay the same dynamic of the industry, right? In a sense, because if you talk to sell-side ad tech companies now, often the differentiator remains, or the lack of differentiator for those who are in trouble, is those creative capabilities. Like if you think about Transmit, they're a perfect example, right? They have the proprietary picture-in-picture format that is unique on CTV, and that allows them to get beyond the traditional ad break. And then because they have that creative format, they're able to get unique inventory because they attract publishers who want to use them for that differentiated reason. And then because they have the unique inventory, they can also generate incremental demand because buyers will go to them for that, and the buyers can't get that inventory that Transmit creates through anyone else. So
Yeah,
it's interesting that 10 to 15 years later, that challenge and that opportunity remains.
and what's even more crazy is, you said earlier, the sort of resurgence of the ad network as a category. It became such a dirty word that we would actively try to create like new proper nouns for our business, because there were just these like edicts at customers: we don't work with ad networks. So I was like, okay, if you don't work with ad networks, what the hell are we? That's why I get a kick out of every time Eric Seifert chirps up in my feed. Everything is an ad network. He sort of illuminated the very positives of the model, and there are a lot of great positives of the model. It's a great business model. It can be super helpful to customers in the ecosystem. I remember there was this one time where Mike and I had this like challenge to change. Again, we didn't know what the proper noun was, but nobody could call us an ad network. I think it was Ad Age or something, like called us an ad network in an article. And we were like, can we get them to issue a retraction and remove the ad network label? That I don't remember if we were successful on that one. But again, it's so funny how these things come around.
That sounds like the sort of thing founders ask the PR person for. The PR person's like, no.
Yeah, fun days.
So third and final topic, life after exit. So how did your life change after you guys sold Undertone?
How did my life change? Well, I worked at Perion. So I stayed on at Perion for 18 months post-acquisition. I embraced the opportunity to, be part of a larger organization, be part of the, post-merger integration, trying to be helpful to the companies. Perion wanted me to take on different roles within the organization. So I got experience, because it was a public company. I got experience doing IR and investor conferences and all of that stuff. So I had, kind of different reporting structures, different accountability. So it was, certainly an adjustment from that standpoint. But, I didn't anticipate, which I think is the question you're asking, was how did I sort of like think about what to do next? Because, Undertone was a very long journey. The outcome we were going for was, some sort of either strategic acquisition or IPO. We went the strategic acquisition route. I had ambitions to do other things, so I knew that I wouldn't be staying at Perion forever. It was a really good experience. How do I wrap my head around what I want to do next professionally when this was all I did? And then B, from a personal perspective, and I spent a lot of time, frankly, I think more time with founders talking about this and trying to help them not make these mistakes. Now that, I'm nearing the place where I'm no longer the Undertone guy, like, who am I? My whole identity was Undertone. My whole focus outside of my family was professional. So, having a line of sight to, leaving Undertone, thinking about what I want to do next professionally, who am I, right? Like, if I'm not the Undertone guy, it was a pretty difficult adjustment. Like that period, that, after a year or so was a real time of like, kind of soul searching and work and all of that stuff. I had some good guidance in terms of, trying to think through the two questions of what do I want to do next, and frankly, like, who do I want to be, and that led to me, starting to chat with Joe about, trying to do something that Joe Zawadzki, not Joe Zappa, both connected to ad tech, because I believed so much still in the category, and I wanted to leverage a lot of my experience in the network and everything like that, right? So, we came up with this idea of a fund to, kind of do something new in the ecosystem. And then, from a personal standpoint, trying to reconnect with, my, kind of lost self, reconnect with people and family that, I didn't spend a lot of time with along the way, and really kind of fully embraced a next phase. Did that even answer your question, or am I just like turning this now into therapy?
What was motivating you as an entrepreneur at Undertone? Because I think, for example, like, I own my agency. I mean, obviously, with most entrepreneurs, like, we're in business for a reason, right? Like, we are motivated by money. That's one thing. And I think it's okay to say that. But another thing, like, when I think about what I haven't accomplished that I'm really keen on doing is, I feel like as a marketer, as you like work with bigger clients and you work on bigger problems, you get a chance to make a bigger impact and to make full use of your skills and to expand those skills. So when you start out, you're working with like tiny startups, and then you get to start working with like public companies and companies that have, like, play a central role in your industry, which in our case is ad tech. So I've experienced that a lot over the last year or so. It's just like getting closer and closer to the sort of like beating heart of the ad tech industry, and like getting to play a small role in sort of what people are talking about, and how some of the major companies are positioning themselves. So like that's a big part of what I'm excited about. I'm curious for you, like, what that felt like and what you felt like the major motivating factors were.
It's something that I think it was very hard to articulate for me for a very long time. I was always attracted to the rush of all things commercially oriented. I was always attracted to, like working with customers, the sale, the wins, like, how that impacted the organization. So, it's like, I don't know if I have like just a very kind of like dopamine centric personality, but what is all that at the end of the day? It's that's impact, right? Like being able to like, have and then understand the impact that you're having on a customer, on the organization, all of that. So, as Joe Zawadzki and I have continued to develop and, kind of like, to refine what Aperium is, a lot of what we are understanding, I think both motivates us and is really, kind of the driving force behind what we're doing. It's around impact. It's around impact on a company perspective in terms of the companies that we work with. It's about impact on the industry. Like, we think that there's, real directions that the industry should move towards that are very positive for the industry and sort of kind of the constituents that it serves. And, we're trying to build a firm and architect a firm that allows us to have impact on a much larger scale than we could individually have at those companies. So where, at the atomic level, it's making a sale, it's winning a new customer, it's, what that has, from an impact in terms of like revenue on your organization. Zoom out on a macro scale, it becomes about multiple companies. It's about, categories. It's about industry. So for me, the one word answer, after a lot of words, what motivates me now is impact, and I think it always has.
Yeah, maybe there's a similarity there. Like, I guess maybe I would say influenced, right? And I always
Maybe.
talk about, influencing the
Yeah.
discourse and influencing your customers and those who influence them. Like, yeah, there's something, I think the people who really succeed in ad tech, like this is like a very tightly knit sort of, some would critically say insular industry. And I think
I think so.
that, yeah, people who really excel in it, they take pride in remaining abreast of what's going on and sort of like being at the forefront and understanding like which direction is this heading and can I play my role in shaping that direction, which you and Joe at Aperium obviously now have a very central role in terms of investing in over 80 companies and consulting on growth and everything else you guys are doing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's very well said. Maybe the word is actually influence. The other side of it, from a personal perspective, and just to kind of complete the thought, a lot of founders and a lot of the same founders you might point to in what you said before that are like so all in on the industry and on ad tech. I find that they're extremely myopic, and that's all that they're all into, and that's great, and can allow you to have like real commercial success if all the stars align. But oftentimes you end up becoming an extremely one-dimensional person. Again, you got this a little bit when we got to know each other. Oftentimes I ask very intentionally the founders that I meet, like, okay, outside of work, like, what are you into? What do you like to do? And I would say at least 80-90% of the time, the answer that I get is oftentimes like nothing. Like they're so all in on the
Yeah.
company. And it's understandable, but what I faced down at the end of Undertone was like a 15-year journey when it was literally like my entire personality. No interests, no passions, no nothing outside of this company, this thing, which again, we were very fortunate to have a good outcome with. But it was the same, set of questions. If it wasn't a good outcome, it's like, okay, like I'm done. I'm moving on to this thing. Outside of, going into another professional endeavor, like, what am I going to do? Like, who am I? So that started a process where I, really tried to like, rediscover like what my personal interests were. I had a lot of fun trying to discover like, the things that I like to do outside of work and being with my family. And I would say that I'm a much more well-rounded, frankly, interesting person today than I was then. And I always encourage my founder friends and my portfolio company CEOs to not make that mistake, not get to the point where it's 10, 15 years later and all you got is an ad tech business. Even if it's the best ad tech business, that's not all there is in life. And frankly, if I think back, if I was more well balanced, I probably would have been a better founder, a better executive.
Yeah, it's also just, my instinct was to be like, and this is how being well-rounded actually makes you better at work. But it's true, right? To your point, like all these things reinforce each other, like having a little bit of balance, maybe like 80-20, right? It's not going to be like a perfect balance. Like founders are always going to be, or, and probably should be a little obsessed with work,
Of course.
but yeah, you being a little well-rounded, doesn't hurt.
I believe that it makes you better in so many ways. So everybody's got their individual thing. I can't, help and comment on what that thing should be. If you get me started, I talk about, my passions endlessly. You've been on the receiving end of that, a few times. But, my advice to founders post exit outside of, what are you going to do next in your career to, kind of maximize impact, influence, all of that stuff is just think about you as a person and what you might have kind of sacrificed along the way and bring a little bit of that back. Try to develop yourself as a person in every way.
Last question. So you're obviously when you started Pyram, you're in a different financial position than you were when you started Undertone. I mean, you were like what, 24 when you started Undertone.
Yeah.
So how does that condition the way you approach the job as one of the general partners of Aperium? Or do you find that actually you kind of operate the same way despite having a different financial picture personally?
I think I operate the same way. You'd have to get Mike and Joe Zawadzki in a room to validate this. I am like when I'm in it, I am pedal to the metal, risk on, focused on winning, focused on impact. And at the same time, I'm like super frugal. I embrace startup mode, and I kind of look at the mechanics of the business. So I don't I don't think I operate differently at all. I don't know if I even answered. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, that answers it. I mean, I think that's actually probably true for a lot of people. I think the notion that after you have a significant first exit, you're going to change significantly the way you operate. I think for a lot of people probably isn't true, right? Like it's sort of a story we tell ourselves because we think like, oh, this will be transformational or whatever. But I don't know. I think it's like at the end of the day, it's kind of like, all right, the number in the bank account changes, but like you are who you are. Like you're going to approach the work in a similar fashion, I think.
I recognize that, having a good outcome is very rare, and it's like, like a very special thing, and I'm privileged. But I'll just give you my perspective, and we might have even talked about this before. The most anticlimactic thing I ever experienced was the close of the sale of Undertone. I thought like it was going to be just the biggest rush. What I mean by close is like signing papers and like wires hitting and lawyers confirming wire out, wire in, all of that stuff. I felt nothing. I felt exhaustion actually, because at the end of a process like that, you're just exhausted. And I got up the next day and I went to the office because we had a whole new set of, challenges and stuff to do around like communication of the deal and employees and everything like that. It was the most anticlimactic thing I can imagine. Again, I feel very fortunate to, be able to sort of kind of pay the bills and have everything, in the place that I, always wanted to from a family standpoint. But if you're expecting that to be something that changes your life or solves your problems, I got news for you. It absolutely won't.
I think it's especially for people who are industrious enough to get the big eggs in the first place. I think like the work continues, right? Like that's kind of that's the headline.
Absolutely. The work continues. Your issues are the same. Sometimes it creates a new set of issues. We all drink the same Coke Zero, right? Like, you and me, Peter Thiel, Jeff Bezos, we're all drinking the same Coke Zero. There was a funny post this week about just how everything is sort of like level from a playing field perspective. But it's a little bit of that. And you get to the other side, you just realize this mountain that you were climbing might not have been the mountain that you were thinking that you were climbing the entire time. It's a journey of, I think more about self-discovery and the process, learning about yourself, as it is, the shiny pot of gold at the end.
Well said. It's about the rainbow, not the pot of gold, people. All right. I think that's a good place to end. Thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe, like us, whatever you're supposed to do to remember that we exist. Please do it. And we'll talk to you next week. Thanks.
See you next week. Thanks, everybody.